Okay, welcome to NileValleyCiv 11. It's going on forever. But anyway, we're going to get through this. So now we're going to look at the dynastic kingdoms of Kemet. And you will understand that they had the same philosophy, same concepts, and very similar skill sets. I said just more refined. It may be not so much that they're necessarily more refined. It may be that they are simply newer. Okay. So remember, I was telling you that there was a grid system that was found on the walls. I forget which lecture it's in, but so the way that people were represented, the way that objects were represented in a very specific way, where bodies were turned side, the eyes are always over here. That way of presenting imagery has to do with geometry and a measuring system. And so that's what you see represented here. And so this is just from some walls, and these are redrawings of those creations, or outlines at least. Okay, and then layout of temples. I think we mentioned that. We did. We talked about it, and how important it is in relationship to the body, how the physical temple is actually a external projection of what is supposed to be happening from within in terms of people developing their inner um, spirit, their inner soul, that sort of thing. Okay, so this is an aerial view of a temple that's at Luxor. And so there are existing temples and places that are based on the Kemet layout. And so, I'm going to show you throughout this section, I will show you comparisons to some things that we are used to of thinking that they are Western inventions, when in fact they have a Kemetic base. Okay, so here's the layout of the Vatican. Okay, which looks very similar to this temple. It does have a few more round shapes, but if you think about all of these narrow passageways, and then this area here, and then this area here, and then there, and then, Holy of Holies is back here, but the masses never necessarily are able to go in here unless they uh, are allowed to at a certain particular period of time. And certainly there are just certain places that lots of people have tried to go into the Vatican, and you just absolutely can't. By the way, I forget what the city is. I don't think it's called Vatican, but the city that holds the Vatican. This is the smallest independent country in the world. So just to let you know something about smallest in population, but they have everything that a sovereign nation would have. And anyway, something to consider as you move forward in your studies in terms of what that could possibly mean. Okay, so here's the early to middle kingdom. So we're going to, now, early to middle kingdom in Kemet, okay? And then so here's this is some forms of script. It's a combination of Meroe and also chematology stuff that's going on here. Written on papyri, I think that's papyri, because papyrus was the first form. And we'll talk about that. I think there's a section where we get to the paper and we're talking about the paper. And papyrus was one of the first forms of paper that existed on the planet. As a matter of fact, that's where the term paper came from, papyrus. Okay. So this is a jar. I think it's more like a vase. This would have had a stand, like a wire stand that it sits in. But it's a beautiful container. This particular container, again, is evidence of how advanced technologically this particular culture was, in the sense that this is stone. I believe this is called alabaster, and it has been carved out meticulously, and it's very symmetrical in its setup. So it looks like lapidary skills. Well, it doesn't look like, it's obvious that lapidary skills were definitely in place. Lapidary just simply means people who work with stone, people who work with rock, minerals that come out of the earth, and then the ability to manipulate it. Okay, so that's what we have here. And then this one, I believe, made out of the same material, though it's not as translucent. A lot of light can pass through this one, but both of these materials, or both of these vases, I should say, or containers, have a certain amount of water that it interacted with as a sediment. What do I mean by that? I mean, in order for this particular material to be formed, notice that we have the waves that are going through the piece. That lets you know that this was earth material that interacted with a certain amount of water. And this is where, be it erosion over time, be it flooding that could have came and then receded, but there's all sorts of reasons that cause movement and pattern in rock. And I mean, in essence, it's beautiful. You know, there's no complaints about that. But I just wanted you to know what you were looking at. And so this one could have been used to hold flowers, to hold, but it definitely had to have a stand because of how small the base is on this. This would basically tip over without some sort of support. So the photography on that looked beautiful. But anyway, this one is a wine jar made out of the same material, not as translucent as that other piece, meaning that not as much light is going to pass through this one. But wine, you know, throughout time has been an important element that people have used to, you know, I think about that Bible passage which says a little wine for the stomach's sake. So sometimes it has been used for its healing properties, other times for the other property that we know people often use it for when they go out to bars, okay? So, but wine has had a long, very long, in different types of wine. Not all wine is made from grapes, you know, palm, apple, sometimes fruit. Wine is made from all sorts of things. Well, all of those things that I mentioned were fruit, but I mean, it could be just about any type of fruit that you could choose to make wine from. Okay. Okay, so with that said, let me move on to this. This is an example of Egyptian cotton. This particular piece is over, I believe it's over 2,000 years old. It may be older than that. And what's amazing to me is how much of this, even though this is not a very large piece that we can see here, but it's a section of fiber, but how long it has held up. I'm pretty amazed at that, and I think that that's amazing that it's held up for so long. But once you start to look into the properties of, this is like a linen, and you start to look into the properties of linen. Cotton has some staying quality. It certainly has the breathability quality for the body, which is good. But linen has this preservative quality about it, which comes from the flax plant. I'll spell that for you: Flax. Again, flax. And so it definitely has preservative qualities to it. And so that combined with the, now I'm thinking about the mummies were wrapped up in linen as well. So with the already preservative qualities that linen naturally embodies, you also had a good use and knowledge in the use of salts, and also a combination of herbs, and probably just how to treat the body, in order to allow it to be wrapped up and preserved. And so this is essentially what people did, okay? And so linen is wonderful. People would wear it out there in that heat, and still do wear it. And it is good for allowing the body to breathe. It's also good for absorbing a certain amount of perspiration. And it can be woven so that it's very lightweight, and it can be woven to where it's also an insulator. It can be densely woven so that it's more of an insulator, like a blanket or something. So it all depends on the weave. It depends on the thickness of the fabric that is put together. And so I think that what you can see here, based on the visual, is that this is sort of a gauzy woven piece of linen. Gauzy meaning it's fairly lightweight. It's going to allow for a certain amount of breathability. I cannot tell you for sure if this was part of something that came off of a mummy, or something that was wrapped up as clothing, or perhaps buried under something as clothing that was put aside. I'm not sure. I cannot tell you exactly what the use of this particular piece of fiber was, but I can tell you about when it dates back to, and I can tell you about the properties of it, and why we should look at what these people understood about linen, okay? There is another story I could tell you, but I'll probably tell you that when you chime into class. If you chime in and talk about the linen bit and how it how I've had experience with it being a preservative fiber. Okay, so I don't believe that this one is actually, let me double check the notes. I'm pretty sure it's not actually in your slides. And if it is, I'm pretty sure it's definitely not something that I'm going to test you on. No, it is in your slide. That's fine. So it's put in there. This is the handle of a sword, okay? A solid gold sword, at least for the handle. I'm not sure about the rest of it. It seems like the rest of it wasn't all solid gold, but the handle certainly was. And so I put this in there, though, as a beautiful example. And this is from Tutankhamun's tomb, 18th dynasty, about thereof. And so if you take a good look, I don't know if I can zoom in right quick, can I? No. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Yeah, because what I want you to see is the detail that and the skill set that has obviously been mastered. Not only is it thought of in terms of design for grip as a handle to hold on to, but it is also well designed and beautifully crafted in terms of the metal work. You are looking at amazing design and soldering work. Look at all of these designs and the soldering work, okay? These little beads that have been soldered to the surface. Also the bands here that have been utilized to create casings for the inlay work that is done with the semi-precious stones. Inlay, we didn't talk about inlays a lot yet. What is the difference between an inlay and a setting of a stone? I'm gonna go ahead and push this back out there. so we can see it in another view. But an inlay, there we go. Let me go back up. Inlay, as opposed to a setting. Okay, when you see, usually it's women, sometimes you see guys with them, but usually it's women walking around with a stone that is raised above the surface of the ring. And it is like set in sort of a prong setting, like here's the prong, and then the crystal or the stone or whatever is in there. That is a setting. It's set inside, and usually it goes back down, but there's this prong sort of effect with the metal that is holding the stone in place. Okay, that's a setting. An inlay is very much similar to actually everything that's here in terms of the semi-precious stones. It's laid fairly flush. It's laid and meant to contour, you know, the just like here with this little abstract lotus, it's contoured. The stones themselves are contoured to the shape that they're going to fit in. Same right here with these shapes and these shapes down here. And they are flush with the surface, not above the surface like the setting. Okay, so this is inlay work, just like it sounds. It's laid into the surface, and it lays fairly flat. Okay, so that's what you're seeing an example of here. So I don't think this appears on the exam, but if it does, just remember that it came out of Tutankhamun's tomb. It is an example of exquisite inlay in a combination of metalwork. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the symbolism that's on here too much, but just understand that we're looking at advanced metal and lapidary skill sets here. Okay, another wonderful example of inlay work. Not necessarily a whole lot of metal that's happening here. There is some, but most of the inlay that is happening here is happening with the wood, because the base of the chair, the seat of the chair, the back of the chair, and the legs are mostly wood. And it's a combination of ebony wood. I forget what the other kind of wood is, but I know for sure ebony. It's a combination of gold. There's ivory here, and a combination of semi-precious stones. I'll say that again. Ebony wood, some other kind of wood too, but let's say ebony, gold, semi-precious stones, and ivory inlay. And then there's other, I don't know if some of the wood is dyed, but let me show you this up close. See? So some of these darker areas, like, let me see on the back, let me get my mouse, there it is. Okay, this area here, right here, those might be some of the ebony wood, but then with the reverse out of either it being carved into and then stained over. I'm not sure. I would have to get a good look at it, but it's absolutely, in terms of, again, an art piece, an exquisite example of craftsmanship. Okay, it's an art piece and a very functional seat all at the same time. So let's go back to this and we can kind of talk about it. Then I'll move forward to that other image again. So now what we'll notice is that the basic form, like if you could take the back, of this part off, this basic form, this kind of curved area where the backside sits, and then as a stool, as a basic seat, that seems to be pretty consistent with, well, it's going to be consistent at least with the African art the other African art that I'm going to expose you to in Central and West Africa. And the importance of the seat or the throne being a place of power. Remember Aset when she had her, sometimes she's depicted with a throne on her head, and how important that seat of power is, and how important her divinity is, and how she passes that on essentially through her bloodline, right? I mean, she's a netter, but the importance of the feminine passing on authority and power, okay? And then once that authority and power is passed on to, for in this particular instance, to Tutankhamun or to King Tut, as you might know him, um, he had to have an important place where he sat. So the whole concept of the king's throne or the queen's throne, or them having special seats, even like in the Catholic Church, the bishop, the pope, and them having these special seats that is reserved just for them or for bishops or whatever, um, is a old concept that predates a lot of the Western processes. So let me see, what else do I want to tell you about this chair? So the other thing that is being emulated here, which is a very old concept, there was something I pointed out to you in Nubia, where there was an imagery of several people walking. You can check out some of the past videos if you need to review it. But just, I'm telling you also here, which is that you saw people up and around, walking around, and if they were important individuals, they might have had like a cat tossed over them. Um, the importance of the big cat, and the big cat being associated with power, just like the lion that we're going to see, is repeated as a theme, and it's a very old African theme, okay? So the pattern that's here in the seat right here, and then right in here, we have a lot of animal prints. So again, the seat of power being associated with the big cat, being associated with whether it's the cheetah or the leopard or a lion itself. All of that is important. So with that, I believe we're going to stop. I'm not sure how long this one is, but I feel like I should stop here. And then I'll get into the importance of understanding the difference between a natural, this is a natural stone, and tumbled stone. So I'm gonna stop here.